Everyone believes ancient humans walked into a wolf den, plucked out a litter of puppies, and slowly tamed them into the first dogs. It is a tidy story. It is also probably backward. The wolves that became dogs may never have been captured at all. They may have simply refused to leave. What really happened at the edge of those ancient campfires? And why does the science keep pointing away from a human hero and toward the wolves themselves? Begin with the traditional picture, the one most people already carry. In that version, a Paleolithic hunter finds an orphaned wolf pup, feels a flicker of affection, and raises it by hand. Generation after generation, humans supposedly repeated this process, selecting the friendliest pups each time, until a tame, loyal dog eventually emerged. It is a comforting story, built around human intention and human kindness. The trouble is that raising a wild wolf pup by hand does not reliably produce a tame adult wolf. Wolves raised from birth by humans still tend to grow into wolves, cautious, independent, and difficult to control, no matter how much affection they receive early on. If deliberate hand-raising alone were the mechanism, domestication should have been far easier and far less rare than it actually was. So researchers went looking for a different starting point, and they found it not inside human settlements but at the edges of them. Wherever ancient humans hunted, camped, or eventually farmed, they left behind waste. Bones, scraps, and discarded food. That waste created something new in the landscape, an entirely fresh ecological niche, one that had never existed before humans arranged themselves into semi-permanent camps. Biologist Raymond Coppinger argued that certain wolves began exploiting that niche directly, scavenging near human camps rather than avoiding them. This was not training. It was economics. A wolf willing to tolerate nearby humans gained access to a steady, low-effort food source, and that access came with an evolutionary payoff worth having. Approaching a human camp required something specific from a wolf, though, and this is where the first real mechanism comes into focus: flight distance. Every wild animal has a threshold, a distance at which it will bolt rather than tolerate a threat nearby. Wolves vary in that threshold naturally, the same way any wild population varies in temperament. Coppinger's theory holds that wolves with a naturally shorter flight distance, the bolder, calmer individuals, were the only ones capable of exploiting the scavenging niche at all. The high-strung, easily spooked wolves kept their distance and missed out on the free calories. The calmer wolves fed well, survived better, and reproduced more. No humans selected them. The environment did. That single filter, repeated across many generations, produced a second mechanism. A population increasingly shaped by tameness itself, purely through natural selection rather than deliberate breeding. And tameness, it turns out, rarely arrives alone. This connects to one of the most striking findings in the whole story, drawn from a different but closely related experiment. In the 1950s, Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belayev began breeding silver foxes purely for one trait: calmness around humans. Within a few fox generations, something unexpected happened. The tame foxes did not just act differently. They started looking different too, developing floppy ears, curled tails, patches of white fur, even shortened snouts, none of which anyone had selected for directly. Researchers now call this cluster of traits domestication syndrome, and it appears to stem from changes in a small population of embryonic cells that influence both temperament and physical development simultaneously. Selecting for tameness, it turns out, drags a whole suite of other traits along with it, whether anyone intends it or not. If wild wolf populations near ancient camps were being filtered the same way, purely by which individuals could tolerate proximity to humans, then the physical transformation into something recognizably dog-like may have begun before any human ever intentionally bred one animal with another. The dog, on this theory, built the first draft of itself. A third mechanism enters the picture once that early, self-selected, semi-tame wolf population already existed near human camps. At that point, and only at that point, deliberate human involvement became possible. Geneticist Robert Wayne and colleagues have used ancient DNA to trace the genetic split between wolves and dogs, and the evidence suggests humans eventually began actively managing which animals bred with which, reinforcing tameness, favoring useful traits like guarding ability or trainability, and gradually locking in physical and behavioral differences that no wild wolf population would develop on its own. This is the layer most people picture when they imagine domestication. Came real. It was simply the second stage of the process, not the first. A fourth mechanism completes the picture: cognitive change. Comparative psychologist Brian Hare has studied a specific skill that dogs display and wolves largely do not: the ability to read human pointing gestures and gaze direction as meaningful social cues. Even puppies raised with minimal human contact perform the skill reliably, while wolves raised identically from birth generally do not. That gap suggests something happened at the level of the species wiring, not simply individual upbringing. Reading human social cues may have been selected for the same way flight distance was, an ability that paid off in proximity to people and was passed down as dogs became genetically distinct from wolves. Put those four mechanisms together, and a very different creation story emerges. Bold, low-flight distance wolves scavenged near human camps. That boldness came bundled with physical changes through the same developmental pathway responsible for domestication syndrome. Humans then took over active breeding once a workable population already existed. And somewhere along that timeline, dogs developed a genuinely new cognitive skill for reading human intention, a skill their wolf ancestors never needed and never fully developed. Here is the twist that keeps the story honest, though, because the picture above is far from settled science, and archaeologist Gregor Larson has been at the center of the disagreement. Genetic evidence Larson and colleagues published in 2016 suggested something stranger than a single domestication event anywhere on Earth. Dogs may have been domesticated twice independently, once somewhere in eastern Eurasia and once somewhere in the West, with the two early dog populations later meeting, interbreeding, and blending into the ancestry of nearly every dog alive today. If that dual origin picture holds up, then there was no single moment, no single population of wolves, and no single place where the transformation happened. It happened at least twice in parallel, through processes that may not have looked identical in each case. The physical evidence only deepens the uncertainty. The oldest widely accepted dog remains, found at Bonn Oberkassel in Germany, date to roughly 14,200 years ago, verify. A puppy buried alongside two humans, apparently cared for through a serious illness before it died. A detail that argues for real emotional attachment rather than pure utility. But older candidate remains exist too, and they are far more contested. Bones from Goyet Cave in Belgium, dated to roughly 36,000 years ago, verify. Show skull proportions some researchers argue place them outside the range of any known wolf population, suggesting an extremely early, possibly failed, domestication attempt that left no descendants. Other researchers argue the same remains simply represent an unusual wolf. Nothing more. The debate remains unresolved, and it may stay that way, because distinguishing an early dog from an unusual wolf using fossilized bone alone is genuinely difficult, and DNA that old rarely survives intact. That uncertainty complicates any single, tidy narrative. It also fits the larger pattern uncovered by every mechanism described so far. Domestication, on the current evidence, was not one clean event with one hero and one outcome. It was closer to a slow-motion negotiation, unfolding differently in different places, at different speeds, occasionally failing outright, driven forward as much by opportunistic wolves as by any human decision. None of this required a human to walk into a den and choose a puppy. It required scavenging opportunity, a filter for boldness that operated without anyone directing it, a developmental side effect that reshaped bodies as a byproduct of reshaping temperament, and only later deliberate human involvement layered on top of a process that had already been running on its own terms.